All right, guys, welcome to your next project. So I think you're going to enjoy this project because we haven't looked at hamburger menus or anything like that yet. And this is going to be a hamburger menu that's completely in CSS. Now, most of these things have JavaScript involved, and we're not going to do that. I'm going to show you a trick so that we don't even have to use JavaScript. But first, let's take a look at what we'll be building. Now, what you're seeing here, this little splash page with the image, this isn't really important to the project. We've done all this before. We're just going to add an overlay, an image, and use Flex to center it. What we're focusing on is this right here. This is a hamburger menu, and I believe it gets its name because it has the 3 lines that look like a hamburger. And I'm sure you've seen these before, where you click them and maybe something opens from the side or comes down, or you get an entire overlay like we're doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this, and notice that a couple things happen. So one, if we look at the hamburger menu itself, it turns into an X, which is really cool. And when we hover off of it and go back on, it kind of just goes back and forth, which is a neat effect. And then we get this entire menu overlay with some links here. So this is a really nice menu because it's completely responsive. It doesn't matter how big or small the screen size is, it's going to work, and you don't need any extra media queries or anything like we've been doing. And I built it in a way so that you can use this in other projects pretty easily. We're actually going to put all the menu CSS in its own file, in a file called menu.css. Now, let me explain how this is actually working without JavaScript, because usually what you would do is you would dynamically set a class in JavaScript, maybe like a show class or something, so that when you clicked, you had a JavaScript click event that would put in a show class or something like that. But we're not doing that. This is actually a checkbox. Okay, this is an HTML input with the type of checkbox, and with a checkbox you can style the checked state. Okay, when it's checked, you can add styles to that, and that's what we're doing. We're basically gonna get rid of the checkbox itself and replace it with this, but it still has a check state. So when I click it, we're actually checking it, and we can create all these styles. Basically, choose to display this overlay, add transitions, transform, stuff like that, and then we can uncheck, and it goes away. All right, so this is something that is very useful, very unique. There's no JavaScript involved, so I think you guys will like this little project. Now we're going to start with just the HTML. I want to create all the HTML, which isn't much at all, and then just the base styles, so we get this image and stuff like that, all the stuff we've done already. And then in the next video, we'll start on the actual CSS for the menu. All right, so I have an empty folder called Hamburger Overlay Menu, and I'm going to, let me just make this smaller. We could probably make this a little smaller, because this is completely responsive, so it doesn't matter if we keep it small. But we're going to create a file called index.html, so let's go up here and let's create index.html, and then we're going to have a folder called CSS, and inside here let's create a style.css, and then like I said, I want all the menu stuff to be in its own file, so menu.css. And we're going to have one image, so we'll have a folder called img, and let me just grab that real quick. Now you guys can get this from the files in this lecture. You'll have all the completed files, and you can just take it from that. But let me see, let me just grab it real quick. Where is it? All right, so I'm going to just bring this in here. So there's our image. And now let's go into our index.html. And I'm just going to close up this sidebar. All right, so we'll call this Hamburger Menu Overlay. And let's link in our style sheets. So we'll do link. We're going to have style.css. Actually, it's in CSS/style CSS. And then we also want to include our menu.css. All right, and it's up to you if you want to do this stuff, if you want to include multiple style sheets. If you have a ton of styling for one particular thing like we're doing here, then you may want to do it this way. Or you could just include it all in one. So let's start with let's take care of the HTML. So we're going to have a div here with the class of menu wrap. And inside here we want our input, and like I said, it's going to have a type of checkbox. Okay, we don't need a name and an ID. All we need is a class, and I'm going to call this class toggler. Okay, because that's what it is. It's going to toggle that overlay. And underneath that, we're going to have a div with the class of hamburger. And we're going to have an empty div in here. Now, the way that we're structuring this might look a little weird, but that's what we need to do in order to get the effect that we're going for. So we're going to have a class of menu underneath, and then a div, and then another div. And inside here will be the UL. Okay, so this will be our list. We'll have list item. Let's put an A tag. These aren't going to actually go anywhere. And I want to give you guys a challenge to turn this into a full website with what you've learned so far. I'm not going to go through it because I don't want to repeat stuff that we've already done and that we're going to do in the future, but it'd be a nice little challenge for you to create an actual site from this. I mean, obviously you could just point to about.html and also include the menu in that page as well. But we're going to just copy this down a couple times, and this next one, actually the top one, I'm going to make home. So home about, let's do services, doesn't really matter. Services, and let's do contact. Okay, so that's that. Let's save this and we'll open it with live server, and this is going to look very, oops, hold on, what's going on? I think I have something else open with live server. Let's see, I think I still have my news grid open. Yep, let me just close that up. Okay, so let's try that again. And there it is. So we just have a little checkbox here. So we're somehow going to turn this into this with CSS. That's how powerful it is, how powerful CSS is. Okay, so let's do the rest of the content. So under the last div, we'll create a header with the ID of showcase. And let's have a container, and let's also have a showcase dash container. We're going to use flex here to center everything. And let's put an H1, we'll just say welcome, and then a paragraph, we'll do like lorem 20. And then under the paragraph, let's put an A tag with the class of BTN. I realize I didn't have to do this part, but I'm doing it for two reasons. One, just so we have some things, just so it looks decent, and so that we can reiterate things that you've already learned. All right, so now let's go into our style.css and let's add our main styles. Now we're going to use variables here. So let's say in our root scope, we're going to have a primary color. And I'm going to use RGBA. Okay, remember RGBA is red, green, blue, alpha, so we can add transparency to the element using the color. Okay, so we're going to have 13, 110, 139, and then the opacity or the alpha will be 0.75. Okay, so it's going to be this color here, and it's going to be a little see-through. And we're also going to have a secondary color, which is going to be like an orange. So let's say secondary color. We're going to use that for the hover links. And that's going to be 229.148. 0, and let's do an alpha of just 0.9. Okay, and then we're going to have an overlay color. So the overlay is going to be actually, you know what? I should probably keep the file open just so I can show you like what's what. So this right here, the background is going to be the overlay color. Yeah, that's going to be the overlay. So let's change this to overlay. And this is going to be 24. This is going to be pretty similar to the primary, but darker. So 24, 39, 51, and we're going to do 0.85. Okay, now if you want this to be less transparent, see how we can see the welcome behind it, you can just raise this up. Okay, you'll be able to just put this to maybe 95 or just 1 if you want it to be solid. But I like the see-through effect. All right, so that's our overlay color, and then last thing I want is the speed. Okay, how fast this actually opens. I want to put that in a variable so that it's easy to access. So let's say menu dash speed 0.75 seconds. And I know that this has to do with the menu, and this is style.css, but I didn't want to put separate variables in the menu CSS. We can actually use these variables in that file because we're including the style CSS before the menu, so we're able to use those variables. Okay, now let's add our reset. So we'll say margin 0. I always like to put a space there. Margin 0 and padding 0, and then let's do box sizing border box. For the body, we're going to use the Roboto font, so we have to grab that real quick. Let's go to Google Fonts, and Roboto I have right here. I'm just going to click that, and I'm going to grab, let's make this a little bigger. Okay, so I'm going to grab this link and put that in the index.html right above the style sheets. All right, so let's see, next thing in our style CSS, we want to add the font family, which is going to be Roboto, sans serif, and then let's do a line height of 1.4. Okay, and then we have our container to move everything to the middle. So we're going to set a max width, and I'm going to do 960. And the reason I'm doing it so thin is because I don't want it to get in the way of the menu. I want the menu to always be outside of it. So even if we go like here, you can see that there's room here. So when we scroll down, the content will be, this won't cover the content basically. But you can experiment with it if you want. And that goes for any project. If you guys want to experiment with different values and do things a little differently, that's absolutely fine. In fact, I encourage that. So let's say margin auto, we want to push it to the middle. Overflow should be hidden. And let's add the padding. That's another thing that's going to push the content in. So let's do 0 top and bottom and 3 rem left and right. Okay, so if we save this, it's going to look like this for now. Now, let's see, what should we do next? Let's do the showcase. So showcase, and I'm going to do the background of the showcase as the primary color. So we'll put in our variable of primary color, and let's do color white. And we'll set the height to 100 viewport height, so I want to take up the whole page, and position relative. Okay, I'm doing position relative because we're going to use the before pseudo selector to add our overlay, and the overlay has to be position absolute. And remember, the position absolute is relative to its first relative container, which of course we want to be the showcase. If not, it will use the body as its container. So that's good. Let's save, and just you can pretty much completely ignore this whole part because we're going to be changing this. It's not going to display at first. We're going to add some CSS to hide it, and then it's only going to show when we click the hamburger, which right now is a checkbox. So let's go down here and say showcase before. And remember, if we use before or after, we need a content value, but we're not actually inserting content, so we just put nothing. And then the background URL. So the URL is going to be /img/showcase. We want to do no repeat, center, center slash cover as usual. And then again, like I said before, we want to position this absolute. We want it to start at the top 0 and left 0 corner and span all the way across and all the way up and down. So if we save that, we get our image. Now the image is covering everything, so let's set the z-index to -1 and save, and there we go. So now the image is behind the coloring. All right, and this is a little different than how we've done it before because we're using an RGBA value, and that is what this primary color right here. If I change this to 1 and save, it's going to be solid. So the transparency for the background image is controlled with this. If I do like 4 or 5, you'll see that it's lighter. So you can change it to how you want. Okay, and then the overlay is going to be the menu overlay transparency. So there's really 2 levels of transparency. So let's see. Let's make the showcase container a flexbox so that we can center everything. So we'll say showcase container. We want to display flex and set the flex direction to column because we want this to go up and down, and we want to do all of our centering. So align items center. This should start to get drilled in your head. Justify content center and text align center. Okay, so that should put it in the middle. Now it's not down here because I haven't added the height. We have the height for the actual showcase, which is 100 viewports, but the showcase container, we need to set that to 100% of its parent. Okay, so we'll set height to 100% and save, and now that'll get pushed down. All right, so let's see, the H1, I want to make that bigger, so showcase H1. Let's set the font size to, let's do 4 rem. I think I did 3 on the other one, but I think it should be a little bigger. We should probably make the paragraph a little bigger as well. Showcase paragraph. Font size, we'll do 1.3 rem. All right, and then for the button, that'll be the last thing. Let's just do a class of btn. So the button, I'm gonna do our same rigmarole we've been doing. We want to display as inline block, and let's set the border to none. And the background, I'm actually going to use the primary color. And let's do color white. Let's do padding. So for the padding, we'll do 0.75 rem top and bottom, 1.5 rem left and right. And I just want to add a little margin top of 1 rem just to bring it down a little bit. And let's add a transition so that when we hover over it, it will kind of smoothly transition into the hover effect. So I'm going to say all 1 second, and we'll say ease in out. So save. There we go. And oh, the underline, let's get rid of that. Text decoration, none. All right, so now we're going to do the hover state. So button hover. And since we're using a variable where it could be any color, I'm just going to use opacity as the effect, and we'll do 0.7. So I'll save, and then when I hover over it, you'll see that it changes, and it does it nice and smooth because we added the transition. We could just do transition opacity. We don't need to do all. And there we go. All right, so that's going to be it for this whole showcase area. Everything we do from now on is going to be for the menu, and there's a lot of CSS. Now, having something like this is really cool. It looks really cool, but it is a lot of work. There's a lot of CSS that goes into doing something like this. All right, so we're going to jump into, and that's the reason I haven't created a hamburger menu on every project we've done, because it would just take up so much time, but I did want to include it in the course. So I'll see you in the next video. All right, guys, so I know the last video was kind of long, but I wanted to get the HTML and the base styling out of the way so we can focus on the menu. So let's head over to our version, which looks like this. So we just have the checkbox up here, and the checkbox has a class of toggler, if you remember. So we have class of toggler. Menu wrap is going to cover, it's going to surround everything, okay, including the overlay. So menu wrap surrounds all of this, everything. So let's start with that. So we're going to go to menu CSS and let's add class menu dash wrap. And we're going to set that to position fixed. So when we have our overlay open, and we scroll down, we don't want this to scroll down. Like, we don't want the menu to just go out of focus, you know, or out of the viewport. We want it to stay where it is. So we want to position it fixed at top 0, left 0. Okay, so basically its natural position. We want it to stay there, and we want to give it a Z index of 1 so that it's always on top. We want the menu to be visible, so we want it to be on top of any other content. All right, so if I save that, now you can see that it's fixed, and that white area is now gone because it's just sitting on top of anything else that we have on the page. Now let me try and explain what's going to happen. We need to style the checkbox itself. Now the checkbox is going to sit on top of the actual hamburger class, this right here. We want it to sit on top of it. However, we want it to be invisible, so we want to set the opacity to 0. And the reason that we need the checkbox is just for its state, because we can set it to checked, and we can actually grab onto that within the style, and we can create our overlay when it's checked, and when it's unchecked, we can bring it out. So that the checkbox is just for functionality. The hamburger class is what we're going to use to create the actual square, and then the inner div we'll be using to create the lines inside. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, and close that up. So let's grab the menu wrap and then the toggler, which is the actual checkbox input, and we need to position it correctly. So we're going to say position absolute, and we want to set it to the top corner, so top 0, left 0, and we're going to set let's see, we're going to set the Z index to 2 because we always want it to be on top. Okay, it's going to be invisible, we won't see it, but it will still be there, and we'll still be able to check it. And we're going to set the cursor to pointer so that when we hover over it, we have a pointer. And let's set the width to, let's say, 50 pixels, and height, we'll do 50 pixels. And if I save that, you can see now it's positioned absolute right in the corner. However, we don't want it to show, so we're going to say opacity, and let's set that to 0. Okay, so now it's not there, but it is there. All right, and you can see I'm actually checking it right now. When I hover over it, the cursor goes over it, and it's going to be 50 pixels around. All right. Now, the hamburger class, we're gonna grab onto that next. So let's say hamburger, and we're gonna position it right in the same spot. So absolute, top 0, left 0. And we're going to set this Z index to 1. Okay, we want it to be under the checkbox. And we're also going to set a width and height. We're going to do 60 pixels. So height, and you can mess with the sizes if you want. I mean, you don't have to follow the exact parameters that I am. But, whoops. Let's see, we got width, height. Let's set padding to 1 rem, and then the background I'm going to set to the primary color. Now I just want to show you real quick, if I do like background black and save, we get our little square here, and we can actually check it. I'm clicking and it's checking that input, okay, but we're seeing the hamburger class here. Now I'm setting it to the primary color, so var dash dash primary. And we're not going to get the little drop down in VS Code because the variables are not set in this file. They're set in the style file. So let's say primary color, and if I save, you'll see that it has the primary color and it's see-through. It's translucent because of the primary color is an RGBA, and the opacity is 0.75. So that's what we're seeing here. I mean, if you don't want it, if you want to set it to a different color, or you don't want it to be translucent, then of course you can change the background to whatever you want. Now I'm also I want to display this as a flex because the div inside is going to take care of the lines. I want to center everything, so I'm going to display flexed and then align the items to the center. And let's also justify the content to the center, and we should be good. All right, so that's basically the hamburger, the outside wrapper of the hamburger. Now we want to do the lines, okay? And remember, there's a div inside of the hamburger div. So what we want to do is set this to be a line, and then we're going to use before and after to insert the top and bottom lines, okay, if that makes sense. So let's go back to menu CSS. And I'll actually put a comment here. Let's say hamburger line, just so you know what does what. Because I know a lot of times when we look at complicated CSS, you don't know, what is actually doing what. So I want to try to explain that as we go along. So we're going to take the menu wrap, and we want the hamburger class, and then we want the immediate div, and we're going to set it to position relative, okay, and then we're going to set flex to none and set the width to 100%. Okay, now the height I'm going to set to 2 pixels because remember, we're creating the line here. We're creating the middle line of the hamburger menu. So I'm going to give it a background of white. I want it to be white, and let's say display flex, and we want to set align items to center and justify content to center. So let's save that, and you can see we get our middle line. Okay, now obviously we need 2 more. We need one above it, or I should say before it and after it. So we're going to use the before and after pseudo selectors. So let's say hamburger lines, we'll say top and bottom lines. So we're going to take menu wrap hamburger, and let's say we want the div that we want to do before. So we want to use the before pseudo selector, and we're going to do the same exact styling for after. So I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to do after. And it might turn, if you're using VS Code, it might turn into double colon. Basically does the same thing. A single colon is just a shortcut for that. So since we're using before and after, we need to put in content, but we're not actually inserting content. And let's set this to position absolute. Okay, and it's absolute to the relative div, the actual div. All right, and then let's set the z-index to 1, and let's say top, I'm going to say negative 10 pixels. So I'm going to move it up 10 pixels. And we want to set the width to 100%, just like the standard div up here. And then we're going to set the height to the same thing, so 2 pixels. And for background, I'm just going to say inherit, which will be white. It's going to inherit this white here. So if I save that, you'll see that now we have a line up above. Now, what's happening is both the before and after, it's basically creating both lines, the before and after. However, they're in the same exact spot. We just said top negative 10 pixels. So what I want to do now is just take the after one, Okay, because this should all be the same for both. However, the after, we just want to position it below, so I'm simply going to take the top value and I'm going to set it to 10 pixels and save, and now that brings it down 10 pixels. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And now we have our hamburger menu. All right, so just to reiterate what we've done here, because I know that it might be a little confusing, we set the menu wrap to be position fixed and start at the top and the top left corner. So menu wrap covers everything, even the entire overlay here. And then the toggler is the checkbox, which we positioned it, we set a width and height, and then we basically made it disappear. It's still there. You can see we can still check it. So right now I'm actually checking it. If I click anywhere on this, it's checking it. But it is opacity 0. In fact, if I change this back to 1 and we save, you can see that it's still there. All right, we're going to set that back to 0. And then the hamburger class is what takes care of this actual box right here, okay, which we have set to primary color. You kind of can't, I mean, it's very hard to see because it's translucent, and it's almost the same color as the background, but it is there. And then the inner div we took and we basically created a line. So we set width to 100%, so it goes all the way across aside from the padding, and the height to 2 pixels, so the line is 2 pixels. Then we took the before and after pseudo selectors and we created 2 more lines for those. Set it to be up here at the top, negative 10 pixels, and then we took just the after and we changed top to 10 pixels so that it got pushed down. Okay, so that's what's going on here, and hopefully that makes sense. So I think that's going to be it for this video. In the next one, I want to start to take care of the rotation. When we click on this, I want to transform it and use rotate so that we can actually morph it into an X. Okay, so we're going to do that in the next video. Alright guys, so now we're going to get started on the overlay with the list items. We have our toggler all set. So let's go down here and let's say menu wrap, and let's style the menu class itself. So we're going to position this to fixed and set it to top 0, left 0, and set the width to 100%. We want it to go all the way across. We also want it to be 100% up and down, so basically like an overlay. Now initially we're going to want the visibility to be set to hidden, okay, but if I do that now I won't be able to see it to style it, so I'm just going to comment that out for now. We'll come back to it. Let's set the overflow to hidden, and let's display this as flex because we want to center everything. So we'll say display flex and align items to the center and justify content to the center. Alright, so if we go ahead and save that, now you can see the list items are in the middle here. Alright, so now we want to take care of the menu overlay, which is basically the dark part. Okay, so when we click this dark area right here. So for that we're going to take menu wrap, let's say menu wrap, menu, and then it's going to be the direct div. Okay, if you remember, our menu class has 2 divs in it before the UL. So we're targeting that first one, and we're going to set a background, and I'm going to use the primary color. I'm sorry, the overlay color. Okay. Now if I save that, you'll see that it's only overlaying the menu itself. Now I'm going to set the width to 200, and I'm going to use viewport widths here, and then height I'm also going to set to 200 viewport widths. Now the reason for that is I wanted to extend pretty far. So when this is the finished one, if I click this, it extends. You see how it scales up? It scales up to 200 viewport widths in both the height and the width. So let's see. Now what we want to do, you can see that the stuff has disappeared. So we're going to go ahead and say display flex, and let's align, oops, we want to align items to the center, and also justify content to the center, and now it's back. Okay, so we're just recentering everything. Let's see, next thing we want is to add a transition here, and we're going to do transition all 0.4 seconds and ease. Now what we want to transition is the scale, so we want this to start off with a scale of 0. So let's say transform and then scale, and if we set this to 0 and I save, you'll see it disappears. So scale 0, it's not there, it's scaled down to nothing. And then what we want to happen is when we click this, we want it to scale upwards. So that's what's happening when you see this open, it's scaling up and it's transitioning. However, I can't see anything anymore, so again, I'm going to just comment that out for now, just so we can see this to style it. All right, now let's see, I think that's good for this div. Now the next one, I'm going to just copy this, and let's paste that in and target the next div. So let's see, for this one we're gonna text align center, so we'll save that. Now you can see that these are aligned in the center. We're gonna do a max width of, let's do 90 viewport widths, so it wouldn't go beyond 90 viewport widths, and this is inside the dark, inside this the part we're scaling. And then the max height we're going to set to 100 viewport heights. Okay, and we're going to set opacity to 0. Alright, now if I save that, it disappears, so again I'm going to comment this out. Okay, the parts that actually, basically the starting points, nothing shows, so we need to comment all that stuff out for now, and then when we're ready we'll bring it back in. Now let's see what else we want to do here. We need to add a transition, and we want to transition the opacity. Now just to let you know what's going on here, when we click this you'll see that it scales up, but then you see how that fades in? It doesn't come in with the scale, it fades in afterwards. So that's the div that we're working with right now. So we want to transform the opacity. Let's do 0.4 seconds ease. Okay, so that way it'll just kind of fade in after this div scales in. And then I think we should be good here. So let's go back. And now let's start to style what this looks like here. So let's grab onto the list items. So I'm going to copy this. And let's put this in. And we're just going to use the angle brackets. I know in a lot of these cases we don't need to, like right here, but we'll just use it, and we'll say UL and then LI. And then we're going to remove the bullets, so let's say list style none. Okay, so that gets rid of the bullets. Let's set color to white, even though that's not going to change the link color, but just in case there's a list item that is not a link, and then we can just inherit, we can just do color inherit for the A tag. And we're going to set the font size here. So let's say font size, let's do 1.5 rem, and let's do, actually that should be good. Let's save that. So we need some padding here. Let's do padding 2 rem. Oh, that's too much. I'm kind of experimenting a little bit from my initial one here, because I used pixels and now I want to use rem. So that looks good. Now the links, we have to take care of those. So let's copy this, and let's say we want to target the A tag, and if we say color inherit and save. That's good. They're going to turn white. We also want to do text decoration none and save. All right, now for the hover, I want to use the secondary color, so I'm going to just grab this and let's do :hover, and let's say color var secondary color. All right, so now when I hover over it, we get that secondary color, but I want it to be transition, so I'm going to add to the link a transition of we'll just do color, transition color 0.4 seconds and ease. Okay, so now we get that nice transition. So there's really only a couple things left to do. We need to hide all of this initially, which basically we just need to uncomment the things that we've commented out, and then we need to have an event. Well, it's not technical. Well, I guess it is an event. It's the checked event. When we check this, we want that stuff to show. We want it to scale up. We want that first div to scale up. The second div we want to bring into opacity 1. And we also want to set the visibility from hidden to show. All right, or I'm sorry, visible. So let's uncomment opacity right here. So that's the inner div. And then scale is the outer div. And then visibility, the menu has visibility hidden. So we're going to uncomment all of those and save, and that's going to make it all disappear. So now we want it to come back when we click this. So we're going to add that stuff up here. So first one, let's say show menu. So we're going to say .menu wrap. And this is all going to happen when the toggler is checked. So we simply want to do toggler checked. Now we want to target the class of menu, and we can't do like .menu like that because it's not within the toggler, right? And we can't do that. We can't even do plus because it's not directly after. Okay, the hamburger is directly after. So the way that we can target this menu from this checkbox is using the tilde, okay, which I can't remember if I showed you this before, but we can use this to target something that precedes another element. So we want to grab the menu and we want to set that visibility to visible, okay, because remember initially we set it to hidden. So now we're hitting the check thing or the checkbox, and we're setting menu to visibility visible. Now we still can't see it because the inner div is scaled down, right? So we have to add basically another event with this toggler checked. So we're going to grab this, and we want to take that first div and transform scale, and we want to scale to 1. All right, and then let's add a transition duration, and I'm going to use that menu speed. So let's say var -- menu -speed, and let me just make sure I set that. Yeah, I did. All right, so if I save that, okay, so now that opens. Oh, you know what? We didn't make it circular, so we didn't add the border radius where we were supposed to. So we need to go to that first div and let's add border radius. Unless you want it to be square, but I think it looks cool as a circle. So let's see. That's still not quite right. All right, I'll figure out what's wrong afterwards. Let's add the last one, which is going to, let's see, go back up here. The last one, which is going to bring the items in, right? Because it's set to opacity 0. So we want to target those, which is going to be the inner div, and we want to set opacity to 1 because it's initially set to 0. And let's say transition opacity 0.4 seconds, ease, and let's add a delay, so we'll do 0.4 seconds delay. Okay, so now if we click that, it's almost working, but we have an issue with the circle here. So let me just see what's going on here. All right, guys, so since this is in a flex, the width is being affected. So all we have to do is in this initial div right here, the direct div after menu, is add a property of flex none. So let's put this right here. So if we say flex none and save, and now let's reload the page. So we click this, and now it scales out all the way, and it's not bound into the window here. All right, cool. So let's bring it out. Still looks good. Let's bring it in. Good. I mean, we can still see the circle. And like I said, if you want to extend this, like, you could add a media query and extend this to like 300. Yeah, so now you don't have that effect, but it takes longer. Oh, it doesn't take longer, but it goes, does it go fast? It looks like it's going faster. No, it's not. So you could increase that if you don't like the circle, you know, when it's on smaller screens. But I think it's fine. I think it looks cool. All right, so that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this little project, and like I said, feel free to use this in you know, future projects. It's a nice little menu, and you could basically attach it to any UI or any website. And like I said, if you want to try and turn this into a full-fledged website using this menu, maybe that could be a little challenge for you. But that's it. I'll see you in the next video.